Okay. Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. Sangam Talks welcomes you warmly. We are today in the sixth episode of the ongoing series Luminaries of Bengal, held in collaboration with Sangam Talks and Bengal Abhar. Today's episode talks about the scientific dimension of the Bengal Renaissance, which has been, in my opinion, the most important development from the movement, whether it be the crescograph invented by Jagadish Chandra Basuji to estimate plant change, discovering a new subatomic particle like fermions and bosons, as in the case of the polymath Satyendranath Basu, or Prafulla Chandra Rai, the father of Indian chemistry, for his stable discovery of mercurius nitride. The contributions have known no bounds. The Bengal Renaissance was diverse and composite. However, it was a rekindling of what a Brahmin was supposed to be to the world, the enabler and the practitioner of change through scholarly pursuit. I am deeply honored to bring to the audience our speakers today. Professor Dr. Joy Sen, Chairperson of the Center of Excellence for Indian Knowledge Systems, Professor and former head for the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning in IIT Kharagpur. Many of our viewers would recognize him from the IKS videos on Sangam Talks. He is a bachelor's and PhD from IIT with 11 years of industrial and field experience, studied advancement in human values and planning history and its relationship with history of Indian knowledge systems with that of the world, spanning from India to Greece, Greece to France, and France to the USA. We also have among us Kanchan Banerjee, who is a thinker, researcher, author, and social leader, the founder and managing director of a research institute called Boston Center of Excellence for Health and Human Development. Kanchan Banerjee was born in a small village of West Bengal, India, where he had first-hand experience of the communist movements, including the rise of the Left Front and Naxalism. Later, he moved to the USA to study computer science. As it happens with anybody living far away from his or her native place, he also feels a deeper connection to the roots. From far, Kanchanji could see India in a different light. The India of the past, invaded, colonized, yet survived along with its cultural history and heritage. He started questioning many facts about India learned from textbooks in India and the West, media, and literature. That's when he began researching and studying Indian history in world context to determine why Indians are so naive about their past and completely callous about their future and the way out for India to become. We also have our moderator, Dr. Arjak Bhattacharjee, who is currently a postdoctoral researcher of biomedical engineering at Tufts University, Boston, USA. Arjakji is currently pursuing his research in a highly reputed group, which is ranked within the world's top 3 research groups in his domain. Arjakji did his PhD from the School of Mechanical and Materials Engineering, Washington State University, Pullman, USA. His research area is 3D printed implant manufacturing for various cancer treatments and tissue engineering applications, including lab grown artificial meats without animal killing with the help of Ayurvedic medicines such as turmeric extract. Arjakji has authored and co-authored a total of 16 peer-reviewed international journal articles in reputed scientific journals based on his research. Arjakji completed his MTech in material science and engineering from IIT Kanpur and received a gold medal from the then President of India, Mr. Ramnath Kovind, for overall best performance. Arjakji did his BTech in ceramic technology from Government College of Engineering and Ceramic Technology, Kolkata. He directed the world's first documentary on ceramics titled Oneness with the Infinity, which won 2 international awards in USA and India in 2017. He was facilitated by Dr. Harshvardhan, then the Minister of Science and Technology, Government of India, for his contribution to scientific documentary making. He has a total of 20 national and international awards in his credit, including the Best PhD Researcher Award. He has directed and edited a unique documentary on the scientific significance of each ritual followed in a Vedic marriage ceremony named Vivaha. Recently, he published a one research based popular science book on the Indian knowledge system along with 3 other co authors. The name of the book is Ancient Indian Science, Technologies, and Culture. Decoding the Vedas from Engineering to Consciousness, published by Garud Prakashan, New Delhi. This book has become an Amazon bestseller immediately after release on August 30th, 2023. Arjakji is currently serving as the president of Tufts University Postdoctoral Scholars Association. Previously, he has been serving in multiple leadership roles, including graduate school senator during his PhD at Washington State University and head of IIT Kanpur Vivekananda Samiti during his MTech at IIT Kanpur. During COVID 19, he served as a United Nations online volunteer teacher for underprivileged kids in Indian villages. After this very elaborate introduction to our venerable panel, I will request Arjagdi to take over from here. And the book that has been co authored by the venerable panel here will be featured toward the end of the talk.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and you introduced us so nicely. And namaskar, everyone. I welcome you all to today's talk. And today's topic is very close to my heart, that is Renaissance in Science in Bengal. So, first we dive deep into the topic. Let me tell a few lines about the context. We all know that India or Bharatvarsha is a country that cherishes peace, truth, love, and harmony and is more than 5,000 years old civilization. Keeping these values at heart, our civilization has gifted the world many ancient texts like the Vedas, the Upanishads, which are directed towards realizing the ultimate goal of human life. We have made tremendous progress in various branches of science, technology, medicine, and whatnot. So, now if I give a few examples that, let's say, from the basic science perspective, if we think about mathematics, Indian mathematicians invented both decimal and binary number system. So now we all are overwhelmed with ISRO's successful launching the vehicle towards the sun, Aditya L1. Do you know it was an Indian scientist, Aryabhatta, who calculated the distance between the earth and the sun? Just imagine, that time we did not have any computer, any algorithm, nothing. And he was the first one who gave the value correctly of pi to 3, very close to 3.14, which was later validated by modern day researchers. And I would also like to mention about physics. We usually credit Newton about the inventor of the laws of motion. While we are not discounting the contributions of Newton, we must remember few hundred years before Newton, it was an Indian mathematician, Bhaskaracharia, who wrote a book named Lilavati and documented these three laws of motion in through various shlokas. So physics done, mathematics done. What about chemistry? We usually credit John Dalton as the inventor of atomic theory. But do you know, about 2000 years back, Dalton, it was an Indian saint, Kanad, who first proposed the idea of atoms as Onu and atoms as Paramanu and molecules as Onu. So these all are basic science. Was there any development in engineering? The answer is yes. Just go to Delhi, you will find the rustless iron pillar. And it was a stunning discovery of Indian metallurgical engineering. And it is only until recently the researchers had developed strategies and they researched the compositions of the iron pillar and they found out why the rustless properties are happening. And it is nowadays followed in many steel manufacturing industries. And we all know about Ayurveda as well. That means science, basic science, engineering, medicine. In all sectors, India has made tremendous progress. Now let us dive into the same context, but with a specific reference to Bengal. As Gopal Krishna Gokhale mentioned, what Bengal thinks today, India thinks tomorrow. Now the question is, can we connect this famous quote with the science and technology in Bengal as well? So far in this series, we have learned about Raja Ram Mohan, Rabindranath Tagore, Vivekananda, and Mahorshi Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Today, our session is completely dedicated to Bengal's Renaissance in science. To start this conversation, I request prominent author and researcher Mr. Kanchan Banerjee to shed some light on the ancient Bengal's science and technology sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjak. Namaskar to you all and all the viewers today. Uh, First of all, many thanks to Sangam Talks for hosting this series. And on behalf of Bangla Abar, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, including Professor Sen and Arjak. Bangla Abar means Bengal again in Bangla. Um, our goal is to promote awareness, educate people about Bengal's heritage, culture, history, and so forth. So this series is uh, an example of our effort to create awareness about Bengal. When we talk about Bengal, it is actually the undivided Bengal. Most of you know that today's West Bengal, which is part of India, and today's Bangladesh, which was called East Bengal and then became East Pakistan and now Bangladesh, they were together. And actually, the borders extended all the way to Jharkhand, Bihar also. In any case, the Bengali speaking region, that is undivided Bengal, is the focus today. um, but before I go to that, uh, you all know that uh, the people from around the world were flocking towards India because India was the so called golden bird, meaning the land of wealth. And not only land of wealth materially, but land of wealth knowledge wise also. So much of this progress that India had, for example, according to Madison, India's GDP during the first year of the Common Era was close to 33% of world GDP share, and China and India were, sharing more than 50% of GDP for a long time. When the Mughal period ended, a lot of looting happened, a lot of invasions happened. Even in the 1700s, India's share was close to um, 23, 22% of world GDP. So India was still rich, and by the time British left, it was roughly 3%. So Britain destroyed whatever was left over after the invasions and occupations. But how did India become so rich and so prosperous? I'm talking about material prosperity. As you know, that we have uh, read that Takshashila, Nalanda, and so many universities, centers of learning, were there in India. As we know today in America, all the major universities, they bring students from all across the globe, the best research, best innovation, and then productization, manufacturing, export, import, and all this happens because of the knowledge. So India has been a knowledge society for many millennia, and because of that, they built all these institutes. And if you go by the colonist Marxist hypothesis, that these are all were biharas, meaning Buddhist centers of Buddhism and so forth. But people forget that Nalanda had thousands and thousands of books on many subjects beyond Buddhism, Buddhist ideology, and same with Takshashila. During the now I would request um, you to yes. So the today's topic is people of science, galaxy of stars on the Bengal horizon. So next, please. And I will talk about two different areas. Uh, there's part one, part two, and part three. People of science in ancient time and people of science during the Bengal Renaissance. Next slide, please. Ancient times. So we have read in Mahabharata that Bhim, the Pandava brother, Vim came to Bengal. He had some injuries from an arrow and came all the way to Bengal and to the area called Sundarban in the next slide. That area is, used to be called Patalpara. So Bhim came. That's the legend or true. We do not have exact proof, but beyond that, we have known that during the Pal dynasty's rule in Eastern Bharat, in the next slide, it shows the map of the Pal dynasty. Oh, so before that, so these are the lost centers of learning: Takshila, Sharda Peeth in Kashmir, and Nalanda and Nagarjun Konda in Tamil Nadu. And in my research, in my book, The Crash of a Civilization, I have put together about 20 such universities' existence that we have found. But there were many, many more, and they were mostly destroyed. And same thing happened with Bengal also. So next slide. You may have thought of Sridharacharya was a, some sort of fable story, but we know today that Sridharacharya, who was born around 1870 of the Common Era, and he is the one who gave so much into mathematics. First person to solve the quadratic equation, and that is the equation, not that exactly he put it in modern symbolism, but that's what his contribution. Next slide, please. So he gave, if zero is added to any number, so zero, how to deal with zero with addition, multiplication, and division. Division he did not, but also how to deal with fractions and also algebra, and then he also gave arithmetic to us. So this is Sridharacharya in the around 900 Common Era. He is contributing, and he was born in Bengal. That's the first evidence of modern science, modern day evidence of scientific contribution of Bengal. Next slide, please. So this is the Pala Empire I was talking about, 750s Common Era to 1161, and that's the map. So that from Cuttack, which is Odisha, to the area of today's Bengal, and went all the way up to Bihar and beyond. So that's the Pal Empire, and many kings, especially Gopala and Dharmapal, they established, according to some evidence I found, over 50 viharas or centers of learning. I could only trace few of them, but rest of them are either completely destroyed or not to be found. So next slide. So Vikramshila and Udantapuri, these are the two known universities which are in Bihar, was built by the Pal kings, very contemporary and close to Nalanda. Next. So this is Bikrampur in Bangladesh. This is the Bikrampur Bihara, ruins of that institute. Next. This is Jagaddal in Rajshahi, currently in Bangladesh. Next. Somapura in, again, Rajshahi, Paharpur, Rajshahi, recently excavated. Next. Nandadrika Vihara, that is again in Malda district of West Bengal. Next. Bhasu Vihara, and this is in Bogura, Bangladesh today. Next. So those are the institutes during the Pal, the ones we can trace right now, but there were many more, I assume, based on some of the references we have. And during that time, these are the famous people of science were born. Shubhankar Bigham Das, he invented, different ways of calculations. Chakrapani Datta, who was known as an Ayurvedacharya, and he wrote Chakra Tattva Pradipika and few other books related to Ayurveda and health. Next. Acharya Vangasena was a royal physician in Pal court, narrated Chikitsa Sangraha. Gadadhar Vaidya, he composed commentary on Sushruta Shastra or Samhita. Shramana Vidyadhara worked on firearms and cannon technology during Pal era. For just to mention that we read from colonial history that It was in the south. First time the rocket was invented by the people of Tipu Sultan and others. But Shramana Vidyadhara was much, much earlier. He is credited to have actually worked on firearms and cannon during that era. Much details are not to be found yet. I'm doing my research, and hopefully someday I'll find out more exact timing of their life. But as of now, we have some rudimentary information about these great people. Next slide. This is the last, Acharya Surapala. He not only did research on the plant physiology and medicinal plants, he actually wrote this treatise called Briksha Ayurveda, then Shabda Pradeep. So these are for both treating plant diseases as well as human diseases using plants. And then he also did Loha Sarvashva, which is basically metallurgical writing on metallurgy. So these are the great scientists of Bengal in those days. And there are many more, which I find names but not much details, came during the Pal dynasty, from mostly from eastern part of Bharat, mostly from Bengal, undivided Bengal. So that's, I think, my part from the first section of it.
So, first of all, Mr. Banerjee, thank you so much for this enlightening talk. So, while you were talking, I was noting some key points, and I saw that you covered from all aspects in the ancient time. You started with a reference of Mahabharata, then you went to the lost center and of the knowledge system and various educational center. I think that is the most difficult job now, to document those centers. And I am very much thankful to you that you have correctly documented those through your research. And it clearly shows that how much dedication one needs to develop that database. And again, it was a new information for me to know about the quadratic equation also. And quadratic equation, the roots of the quadratic equation, those are extremely important in modern day data science sectors. And it's a proud moment for us to know that yes, it was first invented in Bengal. And then you touched upon about Ayurvedic sciences as well as metallurgy and engineering. So if I go back with the note from where we started, that is there because nowadays science, we usually describe it in three sectors. One is the basic science, mathematical and physical sciences and all. Then is the engineering, then is the medicine. So we can very clearly see all these three references from ancient times in Bengal. And on top of that, there are many knowledge system centers in Bengal. So thank you so much for this introduction in the ancient time. Now I want to go to the next speaker with a different viewpoint. For example, Mr. Banerjee talked about Mahabharata. So we know that Mahabharata is a spiritual connection for us, and not only spiritual. Mahabharata is something in Bengali we call it that everything is there in Mahabharata. So far we learned about the physical sciences and the physical sector. Now I want to connect. Was there any development in ancient Bengal in the metaphysical sector of science? Because this metaphysical sector of science or quantum science, etc., are nowadays very booming areas. But we all know that India made a stunning discovery in these areas before. I would move on to our next speaker, Professor Joy Sen, to throw some light in a Bengal's context, if we can find some connection between this physical science as well as the metaphysical science. Professor Sen.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. And it's really a pleasure to be a part of this gathering, to be a part of Abar Bangla, the resurrection of Bengal, and also the great services which is being forwarded by Sangam Talks. I just followed the footsteps, and I am following the footsteps of a wonderful and systematic presentation by Sri Kanchan Banerjee. And I think his presentation has really given us a very strong backdrop, starting from the ages of Mahabharata. Let this slide be there for some time. But much before the Mahabharata, the age of Ramayana is synchronous with the history of Bengal, because the story of Ramayana begins with a sage who even exceeds the capacity of the seven sages like Vashishta, Bamdeva, and Agastya. The name of that sage is Rishyashringa Muni, and he comes from the Anga Desha, which is undivided Bengal and a little bit of Bihar that we call today. And it is right from that day, the history of Bengal is very synchronous. In fact, the entire history of Buddhism, which is a few thousand years later, is actually a derivative of that ancient history. So that is a topic which deserves a separate discussion. And then Bengal comes again and again in history. It comes in the books by Megasthenes and Arrian, the Indica, and the armies of Alexander come all the way inside Bengal, including Megasthenes and Indica, and they have talked about a great ancient port, a very vast, fertile agrarian background, and rich collection of cities and regional systems, which they called Ganga Hriday. And it is again re-mentioned in the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, which is about the time of Jesus Christ. And it comes out again 1,000 years later when Al-Biruni visits India, and he calls that Ganga Shire. So in other words, we get an uninterrupted history of Bengal. Now, given this background, I like to focus on a certain larger and a slightly deeper angle of science, which is very unique in this eastern portion of India, where the Ganga comes from the Himalayas and joins the sea, the famous Ganga Shire, which is mentioned by Al-Biruni, or the Ganga Hriday, or what we call the Sagar Sangam. But I'll take a little bit of a wit and a humor right here, which really brings us to Bengal so much. I think people all around the world right now is really enjoying a movie in the halls, which is Oppenheimer. And with Oppenheimer, all of a sudden the global crowd, the global intellectual crowd, and even the ordinary crowd of any nation in the world is exposed to the huge explosion of science and technology, which took place roughly 100 years back in Europe and finally in the United States of America, and definitely in other countries. So Oppenheimer was a man who was very intimately related with the histories and the deep philosophies and the cosmological constructs of India. In fact, he was trained by a teacher in the University of Berkeley, California, and through that he developed his interest in the Meghdootam by Kalidas and also the Bhagavad Gita. So when the baby or the miniature atom bomb was exploding in the Los Alamos and finally on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Oppenheimer had no other books but to compare the nuclear explosion and the release of atomic energy to those beautiful lines that comes from the Vishwarup Darshan Yoga. That is absolutely fantastic. He had no other books but to compare the lines from the Bhagavad Gita. And his whole life, if you look, starts with Werner Heisenberg in Germany, with Professor Ernest Rutherford, who is also intimately related with Professor C.V. Raman, coming a few decades later, and then with Professor Albert Einstein, Sir Albert Einstein, who is denoting another great advent of Indian metaphysics, Indian cosmology, and the Indian advent of science. So let's move on to the next slide, and it will become very clear with the next slide what exactly is Bengal, what exactly is undivided Bengal. Much of science that we deal with, much of scientific constructs that we look up to based on the Newtonian or reductionist science is actually a forward linkage of time. That means you're doing something right now and then you shall be doing something later. So it's a connect from the present to the future. It's called the forward linkage in time. But with the rise of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and the quantum mechanics in other areas like quantum chemistry and quantum biology, and definitely quantum electrodynamics, the times of Richard Feynman, and of late quantum cognitive sciences, which is entering the area of molecular biology and neural sciences, we get a striking similarity between the latest of Western sciences and the highest sciences which has come out of Bengal, which is just not the yogic, Vedantic standpoint of a worldview where you transcend the worldview and go beyond, but there is also a parallel worldview where you come back from the transcendental point into this universe and everything becomes an extension of the absolute itself. Now, this is something which is very powerful about the science that evolves in Bengal. I'll make it very simple, and it has been made evident by the marriage of the transcendental with the immanent, by the marriage of the Purusha and the Prakriti, by the marriage of the Shaiva and the Shakti approach to Indian spirituality. And it exploded in the last 1 century with the great spiritual personality of Sri Ramakrishna, and finally extending to the lives of Swami Vivekananda and also Sri Aurobindo. Now, here in Bengal, you get this two connections of time, one going beyond the universe and one coming back into the universe. So this double intender of science, which is called causality and retrocausality, is also the spiritual science of Bengal, where you combine the Brahman, the absolute, the transcendent, with the immanent, which is Brahma Shakti. And this is the foundation of the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides is exactly this. Now, this is something which is very special about the science which emanated out of Bengal. And that is why you shall be seeing that Heisenberg came all the way to meet Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. And in the next year, 1930, Albert Einstein invited Tagore to his Berlin home. Let's go to the next slide. So with this background, the first light of Bengal's youth force was Swami Vivekananda. And somewhere a few months before 1893, the two masterminds, that is Swami Vivekananda and Sir Jamshedji Tata, was making a common ship journey from Yokohama in Japan to Vancouver in the western coast of America. And they were at large discussing about the synthesis of Indian spirituality and the modernization of India based on the advent of the West, on the modern principles of industrialization. I think you all know the friendship between Sir Jamshedji Tata and Swami Vivekananda charged the scientific galaxy of India, because Homi Jahangir Bhabha was born out of Jamshedji Tata, and then the whole lineage up to the time of APJ Abdul Kalam through Vikram Sarabhai comes from that common point, which is Swami Vivekananda. So this is the point of India's modernization and India's industrialization. And Swamiji very succinctly said that the eastern fields of India are rich in minerals and the southern population is intellectually advanced, and Bombay could be a possible place for advanced research. And that is precisely the basis of the Tata Mines and TISCO and Telco in the east, and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in the south, and TIFR, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, on the western coast. So with this background, next, when Swamiji enters Chicago on the first day, and he wins the mind of thousands of Americans with his clarion call and a voice to voice, a soul to soul connect in his speech and deliverance. It was very astonishing that a yogi, a yogeshwara, a prophet, a reformer, a leader coming from Bengal and of course from India was mostly greeted by the top scientists of America at that time. And this was professor who later was known as Lord Kelvin, one of the fathers of electrical sciences, and then Hermann Helmholtz, which is who is the father of thermodynamics, and then finally Nicholas Tesla. I think I'll pick up my speed because there's so much to say about this. Next, please. And this actually triggered the beautiful dialogue between Swamiji and Nicholas Tesla for the next few weeks. The connection between prana and akasha and force and matter that influenced the whole generation of scientists. Next, please. And that triggered a historic journey of Werner Heisenberg coming to India in 1929 to meet Gurudev Tagore personally and discuss the depths of quantum physics by comparing his equations to the line of Gitanjali. Next, please. And in the next year, Albert Einstein invites Tagore to discuss about the connection between the role of consciousness in the reflection and the interpretation of the universe itself. Next, please. And that led to the historical turning point, which is the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics, where the two arrows of time, which I said in the beginning, the causality and the retrocausality, the connections that sprung from the ideas of the microsciences and the macrosciences, the connections between Satyendranath Bose and Albert Einstein, the connections between Niels Bohr and finally Richard Feynman and John Wheeler, leading to the team of Alan Aspect recovering the Nobel Prize on Quantum Physics in 2022, has a deep connection not only with Indian spirituality, but the two sides of Indian spirituality, especially of Bengal, which is yoga and tantra taken together. Next, please. So very recently, this has been recognized. And 2004, Dr. Anil Kakotkar, the chairman of Department of Science and Technology, was invited by Robert Eimer of CERN, world's top center of particle physics, to donate Natarajan as the symbol of cosmic science and cosmic dance, the mandala of time and space, as a recognition and a complementarity between the depths of Indian spirituality in the internal laboratory of human mind and the depths of quantum physics in the external laboratory of algorithms and machines. Next. And that is really supported by the advent of one of the largest influence of India's science on the whole world, which is the science of neurophysiological evolutionary purgation and therapeutics, which is yoga, which has been accepted by the United Nations based on the Tantra, which has been elaborated by Swamiji in the famous book Raj Yoga. And this recognition has come from the United Nations, the UNESCO, in the year 2015, 17, and 19 as world's largest intangible heritage. Next, please. And with this, I'm almost coming to the end of my part one. And this is what happens. It is very hard to explain this slide within 1 or 2 minutes, but the impact of Swami Vivekananda has really influenced the extension of Bengal science, the force of Bengal youth power. On the top, you see Andrew Whitehead, Bertrand Russell, and Nicholas Tesla. Below, you see left Ilya Prigogine and Manfred Wegener. And like that, on the extreme right, below, you see Abraham Maslow and Ken Wilber, the science of Sri Aurobindo, the hierarchy of minds becoming the hierarchy of needs. The whole evolutionary spirituality of Andrew Cohen, which comes from the science and the synthesis of yoga and tantra, straight from the gospel of ancient Gorakshanathji of Bengal to the times of Sri Ramakrishna in our own times. Next, please. So with this, I stop with part one, and I hope we'll have another discussion after this.
Thank you so much, Professor Shen, for so nice introduction. Because the topic I requested you to focus is, of course, not an easy topic, because we all know it is until recently that modern science had started looking for a connection in the physical level as well as the metaphysical level. You summed up that excellently, very nicely, and more importantly, with specific reference to Bengal. For example, I just want to mention a few things, sum up a few things you mentioned. You started with the Oppenheimer movie, and then because it's a burning topic now, and then you connected this with the science of consciousness, the science between the Purusha and Prakriti, and then you moved on to Vivekananda and Ramakrishna Dev's contribution towards science. It is, of course, an unexplored area of research, because many of us, we see Swami Vivekananda or Ramakrishna Paramahansa as a spiritual leader. But you connected that part with science of consciousness very nicely. And for our audiences, I would just like to mention, like, the interplay between the physical science and metaphysical science is one of the most advanced areas of research across the globe. And across the globe, many government organizations or like private funded institutes are promoting this type of research. I'd like to say 2 3 examples. For example, Mr. Kanchan Banerjee and I, we both currently live in Boston, and hardly about like 15-20 minutes drive from Harvard University. And Harvard has a particularly designated sector called Harvard Divinity School, where they study about spirituality. And the overall philosophy to bring this divinity school under a reputed university of Harvard is to find these connections. And nowadays, government of India has taken a pivotal role in promoting Indian knowledge system across various IITs. And
Mhm.
here again, you see, yeah, Professor Shen.
Yeah, and this is such an interesting discussion which you are forwarding to the entire audience. I'd like to mention back in 1987, when I was in Iowa State picking up my two master's degree, I got a copy of a very important book published then, which is known as The Tao of Physics by Dr.
Yep,
Fritjof Capra.
yep,
And it was presented to me by an American professor who opened the doors to the bridge and the synthesis and the marriage between the depths of Indian spirituality on the one hand and Western sciences on the other hand. I just wanted to tell that in this context. So
no,
that was
absolutely,
that
you
was
are
that was
absolutely
that
right.
was yeah. So that was the beginning of Indian knowledge systems in my little life. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And we are, of course, thankful to you, because you took a lot of important roles to promote Indian knowledge system, not only in India, but also across the globe.
Thank
And
you.
so, yep, yes, Professor Shen.
No, that's yeah. Please carry on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm done.
So, yep, that's all the summary I have made from your talk. And it was extremely helpful for us to know more about the connections between science and spirituality. And again, with a specific reference to Bengal. I am emphasizing that phrase again and again. Now we'll move on to,
In
yeah,
fact,
yeah,
yeah.
please go ahead.
I just wanted to mention. In fact, I have yeah. So in fact, I did not enlarge at all on Sri Aurobindo because his thesis, "The Life Divine," entered the United States in the 1950s with Dr. Haridas Chaudhary, and that expanded into the American Institute of Integral Sciences, then the Californian Institute of Integral Sciences, and finally the Esalen Institute at Big Sur, California, where all these young boys were tutored and also girls. Two of them were like Abraham Maslow and Alan Watts, who changed the ideas of Americans on Indian spirituality. And then Philip Goldberg wrote that famous book, The American Vedas. The American Vedas.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, that's great. Yep. So now I would move on to our another speaker, Mr. Banerjee, for the next part of his talk to enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjak. Professor Sen, we have learned so much in this short time. We must be very grateful to you that you bring this knowledge in such a professional way that everybody can understand the connection between the this world and the other world, which is both same. I cannot resist, Arjak. I know it is not planned, but I would request for about 90 seconds to actually, since Professor Sen triggered my thoughts, to mention what some of the top physicists he has mentioned about Indian spirituality. I'll just quote few of them, like it will be probably a minute and a half. First of all, he mentioned about Professor Capra, who wrote this book, The Tao of Physics. There he writes that there's a conversation between Rabindranath and Heisenberg, and he writes, he began to see the recognition of relativity, interconnectedness, and impermanence as fundamental aspects of physical reality, which had been so difficult for himself and his fellow physicists, was the very basis of Indian spiritual traditions. So this is about the conversation between Heisenberg and Rabindranath. This is Mr. Capra is commenting on that. So there is a great linkage in that. Since Professor Sen started with Oppenheimer, this is what Oppenheimer had to say about the Vedas. We may actually think that during the atomic explosions, he quoted from Gita, but in other places, he actually clarified all of this. I will quote only one short one. Access to the Vedas is the greatest privilege this century may claim over all previous centuries. This is Oppenheimer. Um, uh, he mentioned Tesla. He also said that all perceptible matter comes from a primary substance, or the unity beyond conception, filling all space, the akasha, or aluminiferous ether, which is acted upon by the life-giving prana, or the creative force. So Tesla was using these terminologies that we find in our Indian sciences, and he was definitely deeply impacted by Swami Vivekananda. And there is a story, it is hard to verify, that when he was meeting Tesla, he asked him to prove that you can create matter from energy. And Tesla could do not do that in his lifetime, but the opposite happened. Energy to matter to energy, which is the atomic power energy. And there is also a story that E equals mc square formula may have a connection with Swami Vivekananda, Tesla, and Einstein's wife. Not getting into the details, but the last one I wanted to mention was Schrodinger. He said he was another physicist, a great physicist of past century. The Bhagavad Gita is the most beautiful philosophical song existing in any known tongue. And finally, Heisenberg, he said in Uncommon Wisdom, in one of the books, he says that quantum theory will not look ridiculous to people who have read Vedanta. This is Heisenberg is saying. So anyway, so these are some of the, little bit diversion, but I just could not resist Professor Sen to quote, though it was not part of the original presentation. I wish I could have slides on that, but that's fine. So now I move on to the next section of this presentation, that so-called Bengal Renaissance. I just wanted to mention that in 1757, East India Company and Clive, they came and had this Battle of Plassey and slowly took over India in next few decades. But 100 years after that, 1757 to 1857, the first war of independence happens, the so-called Sipai Mutiny. 1757 is very important. And when I was going through my slide decks, I am seeing that since the 1850s till 1893, so many great people were born during that time frame, and so much happened during that time frame is unbelievably important for the history of India, for Bengal, and for the world. And so move to the next slide, where I show that Asiatic Society was founded in 1784, and that was William Jones, who was the Indologist, though we do not like his idea of Aryan invasion theory, which has been discarded today. But I don't blame him. In those days, the reference, evidences were so little that he assumed that. But we know that Aryan invasion has never happened. But having said that, he had very keen interest in doing good things in India. When he came to Calcutta as a judge, he actually proposed that they should form this Asiatic Society in 1784, and to do a lot of good things. So next slide. So one of the reasons, as you know, that Britain was resistant to teach modern science, English, and so forth to the native Indians. This is what I found from a note. Someone from the East India Company says, we had just lost America from our folly, meaning America became free in 1776. We have lost America from our folly in having allowed the establishment of schools and colleges, and that it would not be due for us to repeat the same act of folly in regard to India. So they were resistant to give any education, anything good to India, but they had no choice. There, William Jones contributed actually towards the education of people in Bengal to begin with. Next slide. So 1774, when the Asiatic Society was launched, he said, discourses on the institution of a society for inquiring into the histories, civil, natural, and the antiquities, arts, sciences, and literature of Asia. That was the purpose of Asiatic Society. Next. So this is you won't be able to read, but I found this October 29, 1885, an article in Nature magazine. And it has an article called A Century of Science in Bengal. So I was very interested to read that. It's a short essay, but very interesting revelation in the next slide. The report wrote, the bounds of its investigations will be the geographical limits of Asia, and within these limits, its inquiries will be extended to whatever is performed by man or produced by nature. And at the end, it says that this is divided into three parts. History of the society was by Dr. Mitra, its work in archaeology, history, and literature by Dr. Wernel, and the work in nature of science by Babu P. and Bose. I don't want to get into detail. You can actually, once it is recorded, you will see, you do a search on these people, Mitra and P. and Bose, you'll find a lot of information happen. So it was 100 years after the Asiatic Society was formed. This was a report. A lot of work was done in between. Next. So Raja Rammohn Roy, we call him Rajarshi also because he was a visionary. People misunderstood him, and we are trying to show that he was literally a visionary, a rishi, and also a person of great authority to propagate Indian knowledge system. He wrote a letter. Most of you probably know that he was not for using Sanskrit as a language of learning. Not that he was against Sanskrit. He actually promoted Sanskrit in different way. But he said that during that time, India lost all its knowledge systems due to the invasions and occupations. We lost all our institutes. So we need the modern science to be back. The modern science was then in the West. And he wrote to, at that time, the Governor General Amherst, that we need to do a lot of work for the cause of scientific education in India. And in that letter, he wrote in the next slide, as the improvement of the native population is the object of the government, it will consequently promote a more liberal and enlightened system of instruction, embracing mathematics, natural philosophy, chemistry, anatomy, and so many other things. So he requested him to give 1 lakh rupees to providing a college furnished with necessary books, instruments, and other apparatus. And that letter, unfortunately, was rejected. He never got the funding. So he is the Renaissance man of modern Bharat. and he then said, he got so frustrated, he said, you know what, I want to do something on my own. So the man was so much talented, from translating our Upanishads to many of the scriptures, and so much of social welfare system, social work. He also got into science, and he foresaw that if we don't catch up with the West in science and technology, India is doomed. It would be perhaps like Afghanistan today if that was not the case. Next slide. He then himself wrote treatises on geography, astronomy, and geometry, and school book society, in the school book of society. And then he published Sambad Kaumudi, which was a newsletter, and wrote essays on light, echo, property of magnetism, description, whatever knowledge he had access to, he was writing mostly in Bengali for the people of Bengal and India. So this Renaissance man created something that legacy continues. The IITs, the IIMs, all the medical schools, all of this has happened because this man's vision that we need to bring technology and science from the West again. Next, please. So go ahead. So Swami Vivekananda, Professor Sen touched upon a lot. He has influenced not only the Western scientists, but also Jamshedji Tata and many other people, which is not all recorded today. But one person he influenced in a different way, that is kind of most of the time we forget. He trained someone who's a foreigner who comes to Bharat, and Swamiji instructs her to take care of political revolution, arts and sculpture, to restore, and then finally science. And that was none other than, next slide, Sister Nivedita. So Swamiji was born in 1863. Sister Nivedita was born 1867. She comes from Ireland to India as a disciple of Swamiji. And Nivedita works constantly with the contemporary people of science as well as the revolutionaries in political sector. So two revolutions were happening at the same time in Bengal. Political, of course, spiritual, Professor Sen already talked about. Ramakrishna Paramahansa Dev came, the spiritual revelation, and after that, Swamiji Aurobindo. But Sister Nivedita was also working with both sides. Of course, she was part of the spiritual revolution, then political revolution, and the scientific revolution. And I'll show you, hopefully I'll have time to tell you more stories about Sister Nivedita's involvement. So next slide, which is Rabindranath. Again, he is born in 1861. I mentioned after 1857, a lot of things happened. And this Rabindranath is already, we talked about his interactions with Einstein, Heisenberg. He worked very closely with Jagadish Chandra Bose and few other scientists, Praful Chandra Roy. And recently, we found out that the recommendation letter for Bikram Sarabhai to the Oxford University was written by Rabindranath himself. So his keen interest in science was so much that in the last session of, I think, episode 5, we had Rabindranath, and there we discussed in details Rabindranath's role in many things, including science. So J.C. Bose will travel with Rabindranath, and Rabindranath will say, tell me what is latest in science, tell me one story, and I'll write a poem for you. That was the relationship with this. So these are the great people, Swami Vivekananda, Rabindranath, and Sister Nivedita. This trio actually has impacted Bengal and science of Bengal and science of India so much, which is immeasurable. Next slide, please. And this is Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose. And I don't want to speak much because I think Professor Sen is going to take up this from here. But we know that before Marconi, Italian scientist Marconi was given the credit for discovering radio. But actually, earlier than that, Jagadish Chandra Bose was the first one to invent the radio waves. And finally, he has been recognized by world's large engineering organizations. And I was surprised to know that there's a crater on Moon, in the context of lunar mission. One crater is named after Jagadish Chandra Bose. One more point I want to make, that this the colonial historians and the communist historians, they anything to do with India's heritage, India's great past, uh, they did not try, they tried to hide all of those. um, and especially for Jagadish Chandra Bose, there was an article in Scroll magazine, which is, who they are, in November 23rd 2017. They wrote an article saying that why J.C. Bose is fitted in India, although he was mostly marginal scientific figure in his lifetime. Marginal scientific figure. You mark this. This is what the communists write about people who are close to our heritage. And what was his fault? I would leave it to Professor Sen to actually share what J.C. Bose contributed to the world of science. So I stop here, and please do continue, Arjak, with the next part.
Thank you so much, Kanchanda, again for this enlightening talk. And so I was just again summarizing this part, and now you talked about the Renaissance period. You started with William Jones, Asiatic Society, and in this part of the talk, the most interesting part that I found was the 1885 Nature magazine article. And let me mention to the audiences that Nature is the considered as the best scientific journal, and they actually started their journey as a popular science magazine. Then they slowly like started publishing on scientific results and all. And for any researcher, if we can have one Nature paper in our whole lifetime, we will consider blessed. And it is, of course, a proud moment for us because you found out an article at 1885 totally focused on Bengal science and technology. It's an interesting work and it's a great thing. And another thing I would also like to mention about Maharshi Ram Mohan Roy, we know him as a social reformer. But from your talk today, I got to know about his contribution about science, particularly with scientific funding and as well as writing books on astronomy like the school books, etc. So again, for our audiences, we know that research is usually conducted like soft money taken from government or some other industrial sector and all. So funding a research is equivalent to doing a research, if not more important than doing a research. So we should not consider that Ram Mohan was only a social reformer, but his brainchild, due to his contribution, we did a lot of great research in West Bengal. And then again, you touched about Sister Nivedita, Rabindranath Tagore, as well as Vivekananda. And in the Rabindranath Tagore's part, I liked that section where you mentioned that Professor Vikram Sarabhai's recommendation letter was provided by Rabindranath Tagore. And we all know that nowadays ISRO is coming in news again and again, again and again. And India would not have been a space superpower without the contribution of Professor Vikram Sarabhai. And Professor Vikram Sarabhai's success, a lot of credit also goes to Rabindranath Tagore because he provided the recommendation letter. And let me mention one thing. Whenever we apply for PhD abroad, recommendation letter has a huge importance for a successful selection. So that means we can connect Rabindranath Tagore's poem not only to science, not only to spirituality, but his contribution was there in making the man who shaped India's space sector. So, and the last thing, you talked about J.C. Bose, and you mentioned there how many left ideologist historians they framed it negatively, and particularly I noted the keyword that marginalized scientific figure. So my counter argument to those respected historians are, so Sir J.C. Bose was a versatile genius. He had expertise in biology, physics, as well as botany. So that means two completely opposing sectors of science, like not opposing, different sectors of science. One is the biological science, another is the physical science. Nowadays, we talk a lot about interdisciplinary science. So here you can see this man has expertise in everything.
And
Yes,
botany,
yeah, please.
botany also, the plant science.
Yeah, plant science, exactly. So that means what left? So nowadays we are talking a lot about promoting interdisciplinary science, that we need researchers. For example, my field, material science, is an interdisciplinary field. We need people from engineering, we need people from biology, we need people from physics and chemistry. But here, one man, he has expertise in all of that. And that's a proud for us. Now I would request Professor
And
Shen.
before
Yeah, yeah. Yes,
one more
Kanchanda, please.
thing. So he could be called a marginal science genius. Most of the tools that he used for his experiments are not bought from the market. He
Yep.
bought, used and discarded machines from here and there, and kind of from scrap material he used to build his own tools. That itself was a genius work by Jagadish Chandra Bose. He didn't
Yep.
have money. He always had problem with funding, but he did not stop. He created his own tools by himself.
Yep, yep. That's a great point you touched, and we feel proud that Jagadish Chandra Bose was born in Bengal, worked in Bengal, and contributed for our country. So, with this note, I'd request Professor Shen to throw us some more light on Jagadish Chandra Bose and other scientists in Bengal.
Yes, so if I have that slide, which is, I think, slide 12, I can start from there. Yeah, thank you so much. So I think Kanchanda really expanded and deepened on the entire setup of Bengal's science and technology and the contribution to the larger Indian fabric and as a whole. And this was really a turning point, something that we have to understand, because as I said before, and I'm saying it once more, because it was in Bengal, uh, the two faces of Indian spirituality. One is that of Vedanta and yoga on the one hand, and Shankho and Tantra or Tantras on the other hand were synthesized and combined. And everybody from Sri Ramakrishna to Swami Vivekananda, and especially the life and legend of Sri Aurobindo, became a living expression of that. And in this context, there is actually a very ancient legacy of Guru Gorakshanath ji and Matsyendranath ji coming to Bengal and settling in Bengal and bringing the ancient lineage of Kashmir, Kashmiri Shaivism, which is actually not a particular sectarian view of Shaivism, but here Brahman, which is the absolute transcendent, is seen as a personified image of Shiva, which is Advaita Dvaita Roop. Advaitam is becoming the Dvaita, which is Shiva. That is the whole foundation of Kashmiri Shaivism. And much of Bodha Tantra, which is actually the foundation of Sahajjan, Kal Chakrajan, and Mahajan, is actually a derivative of that. In fact, the whole body of spiritual, cosmological, and scientific literature is embodied in this one capsule of the synthesis of yoga and tantra. And it comes out in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, which is the next slide. And someday in Dakshineshwar, this was the year 1885, and Sri Ramakrishna had taken on his body, the load of the whole creation, and he was about to leave his body. And then one very important personality of Bengal science was his doctor, and he came quite regularly, not just to treat Sri Ramakrishna, but with every journey that he made to the place where Sri Ramakrishna was staying, initially in Shampukur Bati and finally in Kashipur Uddan Bati. He was becoming an increasingly a larger devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. And we remember one day that Dr. Mahendralal Sharkar was just explaining the heliocentric and the geocentric ideas of the Vedic scientist. which existed much before Greece by a few thousand years. The Rig Veda, Prathama Mandala, 164 Sutra by sage Dirghatama has about has about 45 to 50 sutras which talks about heliocentrism and the orbital motions and the production of the 12 seasons and the four vaks, which is para, pashanti, madhyama, vaikhari, and everything. It is a whole foundation of cosmology, uh, yoga, and tantra, which comes straight from the first book of Indian spirituality, which is the Rig Veda. And Dr. Mahendralal Sharkar was explaining that on the floor, and other people in the room was not so happy about it. And so when other people were showing some disinterest, Sri Ramakrishna said, no, it's so wonderful. Dr. Sharkar, you keep on explaining. And Dr. Sharkar was explaining the orbital motions of the earth around the sun and the reflective orbital motions of the sun on the earth as the tropics and its movement between the two tropics, which is the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And Sri Ramakrishna could liken that and compare that to the various stages of spiritual progress, which is a deep mystery. And while the discussion was reaching depths, Sri Ramakrishna entered Samadhi. And after he came back from the Samadhi to the natural state, our own state, he said, Daktar, whatever you are doing is so good. Please continue with whatever you are doing. And don't forget the diligence, the truthfulness, and the dedication that you have towards science. Just listen to this. This is recorded in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So the next slide. And that led to the evolution of the deep epistemic knowledge of Indian science and especially Bengal science. The first research institute of science and technology was founded in Kolkata, in Jadavpur, where the final headquarters of Indian Association of Cultivation of Science was erected. The second one was Boshu Mandir, which was actually assisted and garnered and fostered by the huge collection of Sister Nivedita and others. I'll come to that story a little later. And it was in this research institute, a few decades later, for probably one of the last brilliant scientists that Bengal had ever produced at the time of independence and slightly before that, Sir C.V. Raman joined as a young researcher. So you see the contribution of India's science and technology, starting from Asia's first Nobel laureate, that is Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, to the next Nobel Prize in Science and Technology, which is C.V. Raman, that is all sprouting and exploding from the House of Bengal, and Sri Ramakrishna visiting Jorashakor Thakur Bari and meeting Rabindranath Tagore and actually meeting Rabindranath, a fact which has been proved by research. So there is a huge story behind this, but I just shared a little tip of the iceberg. Next slide, please. So with this, the first research institute was created, where the relationship between the larger universe, the macrocosm, and the smaller universe, the microcosm, was initiated, which was inspired by Sri Ramakrishna. Next slide, please. So with this, we come to one of the fathers of modern Indian science, Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose. And in his journey to the Himalayas, he was watching the Ganga coming down from the Himalayas. And then again, the rain clouds are taking him back, taking the Ganga back to the Himalayas. So that is the life cycle analysis of biology. That is the quantum physics cycle of the causality of time going into the past and going into the future. And that is also the thermodynamic cycle of physics, which is the Carnot cycle. So Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose could see life, physics, biology, and spirituality in the movement of Ganga and in the forms of the initial clouds and the later clouds, which is the Purva Megha and the Uttar Megha of Samaveda, the two Archikas, which poet Kalidas converted into Megdutam. And I think you all know that again brings us to Oppenheimer, because of the 3 or 4 books of Indian spirituality, which made Oppenheimer absolutely an Indophile. One was Kalidas's Meghdootam. And in the Meghdootam, the cycles of the clouds going to the Himalayas, to Kashmir, and coming back to the city of and to the coming back to the city of Ujjain, inspired Oppenheimer to look into the retrocausal and the causal forces of fission and fusion. But he was more interested to start with fission and delay the fusion reaction, which is the thermonuclear bomb, which is the hydrogen bomb, which was the second experiment. I think it is very well shown in that movie, because he first wanted to complete the one causality of nuclear reaction, which is fission, and then complete the other causality of the nuclear reaction, which is fusion, which produces 100 times larger the energy produced by the first. So this is absolutely brilliant pointer that comes from Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose. Next, please. And I'll go a little quickly. And Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose, as Kanchan had said, was like Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, he is a man in whom, I should put it this way, which is actually the symbol of yoga. The left side of brain, which is analytics, mathematics, and machine learning, is connected with the right side of the brain, which is philosophy, music, meditation, contemplation, and deep spirituality. So he stood as a figure between the deep intrinsic side of Indian spirituality on the one hand and its external manifestation into the various domains of sciences on the other hand. I think his works from plant sciences to microcrystallography and the macro radiophysics to microelectronics was absolutely brilliant and unparalleled at a time when the rest of the world was yet to grasp what he was saying and what he was doing. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose came up with the famous crystallograph, and he came up with an interface between physics and biology, which is the science of biophysics. And he is one man who stood in between the two terminals of relativistic sciences, something one of his disciples, Sir Sridharacharya Bose, will inspire Albert Einstein to the Bose-Einstein condensate on the one hand, and also inspire the microelectronics of crystals on which he also worked on the other hand. This is absolutely fascinating, working with the two sides of infinity, 10 to the power plus 14 and 10 to the power minus 7 to minus 14. This is absolutely brilliant. Bengal was working on these ideas when the rest of the world was just about to enter such a domain. Next slide, please. So he actually expanded on something which is known as the Samavartana of the Rig Veda, the polarization of the light going up to the macrocosm and coming down into the depths of the subatomic particles. And if you read the quotations by Sir Neville Mott, one of the Nobel laureates, he says J.C. Bose was at least 60 years ahead of his time. He was saying something about microelectronics when microelectronics was yet to be born. And this comes from the mouth of a Nobel laureate of solid state electronics. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And his work actually expanded, and one of his disciples was Sir Sridharacharya Bose, who expanded on this. He was actually a sadhu. He was standing between Rabindranath on the one hand, Sir J.C. Bose on the other hand, and Ramakrishna Mission on the third hand, and the scientific community on the fourth hand. And he was also dealing with the aesthetic agnostic communist community of science, which was inspired by another disciple of Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose. That's really an irony. That is Sir Meghnad Shah. If no one minds that, I want to say that. That was the dichotomy which was producing a lot of unrest in Bengal in the 1940s and the 1950s. I'll come to that at the end of the presentation. Next, please. And that led to the very powered explosion where Jagadish Babu had met Swamiji in the Paris Congress in 1900, where other scientists were also present. like Sir Patrick Geddes. Sister Nivedita herself was present, and other people were also present. And Swamiji was so inspired that he inspired Sister Nivedita to stand on a triangular vertex where one side, as Kanchanda was saying, was Indian spirituality, the other side was Indian science, and the third side was Nandan Kala Vidya, Sthapatya Vidya, Vastu Vidya, where Sister Nivedita was inspiring Ashit Haldar, Ram Kinkor, Shuren Kaur, Abodindranath Thakur, the whole house of Shantiniketan. So this is absolutely a brilliant turning point, and this is the time in 1922 to 26, Gaganendranath Thakur and Abodindranath Thakur even invited world's most advanced architectural aesthetics and built engineering movement, which was known as Bauhaus in Weimar in Germany. And during the Second World War, it was transshifted to Harvard University. And Le Corbusier, Marcel Breuer, Walter Gropius, they founded the Harvard Graphics Arts Center. You'll read that story if you read Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. It's all there in a symbolic form. So such was the glory of Bengal in the 1920s between the First and the Second World War, which was actually taken out of Kolkata and to other parts of India through political manipulation, subjugation, something which is very controversial. And I'm sure it will come out when you have a treatise on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and the comments of British Prime Minister Clement Attlee, that which was the prime force that made India independent. And Clement Attlee, without any hesitation, said it was Bose and Bose alone which made India independent. There is no other cause, because he trembled the British Empire. Anyway, so let's go to the next slide. So this is actually one of the most profound slides. It took a lot of time to get. I mean, here you find the three brilliant people, and Acharya Brajendranath Shil, a scientific historian who was the classmate of Swami Vivekananda, and Acharya Prafulla Chandra Ray, who was also mentored by Lord Kelvin and other scientists, and Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose. This was the three brilliant scientists from Bengal coming together in Christ College, Trinity College, and other colleges of England, and then coming back to the country and serving the country for the next few years or the next few decades. In this context, which is not there in this slide, one of the most important contributions of Sir J.C. Bose was towards bioscience and more to biotechnology, where one of the distant niece of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Gertrude Emerson, inspired young botanist biotechnologist Dr. Boshishwar Sen, under the auspices of Sir J.C. Bose, getting funds by the help of Sister Nivedita to open up the first biotechnological center in Kumayun in Almora. So this is the first biotechnological center of herbal medicine that inspired all the other multinational corporations in the years to come, like Syngenta, like Himalayan Drugs, and many others. Okay, let's move on. So this is the brilliance of Bengal. And one of the most hidden facts, if you look at this picture, everyone has seen this picture, you see the legacy that Sir J.C. Bose leaves. On the top, you see Devendra Mohan Bose. I'm just focusing on him. He is the person who opened up the first scientific commission, which led to the foundation of what we call the CISR and the Department of Science and Technology today. Satyendranath Bose takes over the other side. Meghnad Shaha takes over the third side, and he galvanizes the planning commission under the leadership of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And then finally, in the sitting on the right, you see Sir Gyan Chandra Ghosh, the first director of the first IIT of independent India, which is the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Kharagpur. Its first director is a direct disciple of Sir J.C. Bose. So this is the brilliance of the contribution of Sir J.C. Bose. We are not talking about a person. We are not here to eulogize the statue of a single person. What we want to say here is the gamut, the 360-degree curvature of science, which combines The Two Sides of the Human Brain, the 1981 Nobel Prize by Roger Walcott Sperry on the lateralization of human brain, where the era and the Pingala, the artistic and the scientific side, gets combined in the single personality, and you become someone like Leonardo da Vinci, you become someone like J.C. Bose, and you become and represent the science of an ancient land called Bengal. Let's move on. Next slide, please. So this is where he comes back again and he pays his tribute. So his whole life is the foundation of ecological life cycle sciences, which is the foundation of modern sciences today. And Rabindranath writes his poem. I'm trying to translate it in English. The waves are going down and the waves are coming up. Tarango milaye jaye, tarango uthe. The old flowers are dying away. The new flowers are replacing itself. Nahi khoy, nahi shesh. It is a thread of immortality, the Isha Upanishad. It is on and on. As an individual body, you die. But when you're interconnected in the global area network, you never die, because death only means to a single body. But when life is spread across the cosmos in multiple bodies, you become a yogi, you never die. And that is the vision of yoga and tantra and the Vijnana, the Vishesh Rupe Jnana, as Sri Ramakrishna says. Jnana means just to know knowledge, but Vijnana means the application of that knowledge in universal truth. So that is actually the glory of Bengal that we must remember at this point. Next slide, please. So with this, I almost come to the end of my entire presentation. There's so many other points to be discussed, but I just wanted to say something. Though we have been talking about Bengal and Bengal and Bengal, but it is actually Bharat, Bharat and Bharat. But Bengal is actually an aperture of Indian science where the three extremes of yoga, tantra and shankar gets connected. If you want to know a little more about what I am trying to say, because I am not a competent authority in this, you go to Raj Yoga by Swami Vivekananda and you pick up the chapter which is called Raj Yoga in Brief. There is a 3-page write-up by Swami Vivekananda. He is talking about this special idea of Indian spirituality, which he transfers to Sri Aurobindo after some time, and that becomes the science of Purna Yoga and Integral Yoga, a movement which is shaking the world, from Nicholas Tesla to Arnold Toynbee, from Werner Heisenberg to Max Born, from Roma Lola to Abraham Maslow, you name it. To name a few or to name a many, it's the whole coverage. So with this, I end my second part of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Shen, for another enlightening session. So this session was mostly based on the diverse knowledge and contribution of Sir J.C. Bose. So in this regard, I cannot resist myself to say one or two lines, because when I was in school, and I was from a purely Bengali medium school, and in our curriculum we had a short story written by Sir J.C. Bose, that was Bhagirathir Utsho Sandhane. And there, so because you mentioned, Sir J.C. Bose was an extremely spiritual person, it showed from his childhood only. Because in that story he mentioned, when I was a young kid, that I used to go to the Ganges flowing in Bengal. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Oh yeah, sorry. And then I used to ask the question to the river, Kotha hoite ashitesho nodi. That means, hey river, what is your origin point? So that shows his quest towards spirituality, and that's why he was able to connect spirituality and science in such a nice way. And the Bose Institute, what he established, he gave the name as Boshu Bigyan Mondir, even though it was an institute completely for science, but Mondir, that means temple. We worship science here. And he also came to know a lot about Dr. Boshishwar Sen and his contribution towards biotechnology, as well as like IIT Kharagpur, its first director, Professor Gyan Ghosh, and also you emphasized about the establishment of CSIR labs. Thank you so much again. Now I will request Kanchanda to go for the next part of his talk. Thank you.
So fascinating, Professor Sen. Your presentation brings out so much information which is mostly hidden to people of modern India. So thank you for that. In this context, I was remembering you mentioned something about, from our ancient texts, how the modern science is connected with that. I remember a poem from Vidyapati, who was a 14th century poet from Bihar region. Vidyapati wrote, Kata Chaturanana Mari Mari Javata Natua Adi Abashana Tohe Janami Puna Tohe Samavata Natuha Adi Abashana. It means he's talking about Brahma, the creator, Chaturanana. That means many Brahmas are being born and dead. That means the cycle of yugas, millions of years, it is written in a poetic form by Vidyapati in 14th century, which is amazing that how much knowledge is hidden from us that is in our ancient scriptures. My next part is, I know that we are running out of time. I'll try to be very fast, but it is amazing, a fascinating story. I will try to move it fast. The formation of University of Calcutta in 1857. I mentioned to you about 1857. This was another landmark in the development of science and technology in Bharat and Bengal. And next slide, please. So most people have forgotten Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee. I don't like to use the word Sir because it is a British given title, but nevertheless, he was such a great man. He is known as the Tiger of Bengal because he was uncompromised on his principles, fight against the British people. So he was a mathematician. He was a barrister. He was a jurist. He was an educator. In a one person, you find so much talent. So he was the second vice chancellor of University of Calcutta, who was an Indian. He founded the Bengal Technical Institute, which today is Jadavpur University. We get wrong news from Jadavpur these days, but he founded Jadavpur, and that was mainly for technical and advancement. And then, of course, the University College of Science in Rajavaja Science College now in 1914. So this man had this vision of bringing best of the best in Calcutta University. So Professor Sen mentioned about all the famous scientists, Satyendranath Bose, C.V. Raman, Meghnad Saha. Ashutosh Mukherjee brought them to University of Calcutta or Calcutta University to do their fundamental research, which has so much impact in physics, modern physics, astrophysics, which is unbelievable. So we remember Ashutosh Mukherjee for that. And again, he is born in 1864. Next, please. Now, Prafulla Chandra Rai, Professor Sen mentioned briefly about him. He was born in 1861. He was a chemist, educationist, historian, industrialist, and philanthropist. He is remembered as the father of modern Indian chemistry. Next. Bengal Chemicals, Pharmaceuticals, he wrote a history of Hindu chemistry, and that book is unavailable today. I think every Indian, everybody should read that book that he wrote. And so Prafulla Chandra Rai was a great personality in the history of science for India. Next. This is the picture I think already been shown. From Meghnad Saha and other people. So as you can see, sitting, Meghnad Saha, Jagdish Chandra Bose, Gyan Chandra Ghosh, and standing Snehamay Datta, Satyanarayana Bose, Devendra Mohan Bose, N.R. Sen, Gyanendranath Mukherjee, and N.C. Nag. I don't want to get into everybody, but each one of them, all are in dhotis, each one of them pioneered in some area of science. Next. That was an era. Again, this is another photograph from Bose Institute in 1928. Bose Institute, as Arjak mentioned, was founded by Jagadish Chandra Bose for fundamental research in modern science. And in this picture, you see N.C. Nag, J.C. Ghosh, Jagadish Chandra Bose, M.N. Saha, S. Datta, and N.R. Sen, J.N. Mukherjee, S.N. Bose, and D.M. Bose. Again, these are all of the pioneers of their time in science. Next. Satyanarayana Bose, mathematician, physicist, and his main work was in quantum mechanics, Bose-Einstein statistics, and the theory of Bose-Einstein condensate. And there's the boson particle was named after Satyanarayana Bose. Next. He was a polymath. He worked also on physics, math, chemistry, biology, mineralogy, philosophy, arts, literature, and music. What a genius. Next. That's Meghnad Saha. He was an astrophysicist. His contribution in astrophysics is immense, although he was attracted towards communism/socialism, and there are a lot of distraction in science, but nevertheless, his contribution must be acknowledged. Next. C.V. Raman, though he was not a born Bengali, he was from Tamil Nadu, but as I mentioned, Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee brought him to do research in Calcutta University, and there's a story that he was traveling by the sea. He was questioned why, the color of the ocean is blue and so forth. So his research is called Raman effect. He got his Nobel Prize in 1930 in physics, discovery of first. So he was the first Asian to get a Nobel Prize, again, product of Calcutta University in a way. Next. Gyan Chandra Ghosh, he was a chemist. He was inspired by his mentor, Prafullo Chandra Ray, Jagadish Chandra Ghosh, and others. Next. And this two duo, Professor D.M. Bose and Dr. Bina Chaudhary was a junior to him. They worked on the measuring in physics, the measuring of some particles, and was a breakthrough in modern physics. Next. Yeah. So from basic science to statistics and math. So Prashant Mahalanabish, he founded the Indian Institute of Statistical Institute, which is in near Calcutta right now. He's considered the father of statistics in India. And just to mention what Raja Ram Mohan Roy started his Brahmo Samaj, Mahalanabish was a student of Brahmo Boys School in Calcutta. So he definitely was influenced by those thoughts of Brahmo Samaj. Next. And his teachers included Jagadish Chandra Bose, Prafullo Chandra Roy, Meghnad Saha, and he was 1 year junior of Subhash Chandra Bose in his junior year of college. Very, very great personality. Next. Radhanath Sikdar, a forgotten hero. He was again a mathematician. He's known for his measuring the height of Mount Everest. Of course, not going up to the top. In 1852, through his mathematics and geometry knowledge, he actually measured, not geometry, calculus. He actually measured the height, almost near perfect. So Radhanath Sikdar was there, born in 1813. Next. SND, you saw in one of those photos, group pictures, he was recommended for his work for Nobel Prize. He didn't get the Nobel Prize, but he actually, his work on cholera toxin that the uh, the cause of cholera and possible vaccine for cholera. So, forgotten scientist Sambhunath Dey. Next. Now I come to from basic science to health sciences, medicine. So there's a hospital called RG Kaur Hospital, and it is named after Radha Govinda Kaur. Of course, Dr. Mahendranath Sarkar, who Professor Sen mentioned, he was one of the pioneers during that time to work on modern medicine. Later, he was against homeopathy, and later on, he also turned into homeopathy. Professor Mahendranath Sarkar, I'm talking about. But RG Kaur, he was a physician, very famous, and also a philanthropist. And RG Kaur Hospital in Calcutta is named after him through his philanthropy. Next. The first Roman medical doctor was Kadambini Ganguly. He was born again 18. She was born in 1861, and first person to get into Calcutta Medical College and practice medicine, and became very, very well known during her lifetime. And last one is Neil Ratan Sarkar. He was again a very famous doctor, and he contributed so much in promoting science and technology education during his lifetime. Again, he was born in 1861, and there is a hospital named after him, Neil Ratan Sarkar Hospital in Kolkata. So to summarize my whole, I'll take 1 or 2 minutes to summarize my whole presentation. That the land of Bengal, fertile for known for its Gangetic Valley, the soil, but it was also fertile for seekers of knowledge who were born during those 200 years time, and contributed significantly so much for science and technology uh, for from Bengal and India and for the world. And many times we forget that uh, that the some of the greatest minds in science did come from this part of the world, and world must recognize, acknowledge their contributions, and recognize them, and that will inspire the next generation of Bengalis, next generation of people of India that are just started with this, what Bengal thinks today, the rest of India thinks tomorrow. I think I think that tradition is kind of lost. And as I mentioned, Jadavpur University, which was founded for technological advancement, is in the news for wrong reasons. University of Calcutta, where these great scientists were there, it is not in that, you know, it is not contributing anymore to that level. And Bengal has many other institutes, whether it's ISI or IIT and others. Uh, it is a period of decline that we are living today. Since 1947, there was gradual decline of contribution of people of Bengali origin in science and technology. There are many, and since then there are many who are contributing significantly, but not at that level. And then, of course, many of the people of Bengali origin, they are working outside of Bengal, many places in Europe and America. They're contributing significantly. But I hope to see that Bengal again brings a renaissance in all three areas, in spirituality, in science, in education, someday. And we wait for that day to come. With that, I finish my part. Namaskar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanchanda. So this in the during this part also I took note, and this part I noted like two, three most important things. Number one, for Acharya Prafulla Chandra Roy, so he established, like, he was not only known for science but also for establishing industries. And if I put it in a modern context, we have seen what is going on with the industrialization in West Bengal. and it is probably a nightmare now to set up an industry. But we feel proud that it was a Bengali who was successful in establishing industry in Bengal. Number one. Number two, you mentioned about Sir C.V. Raman and how he excelled working in Bengal. So that means at that time, Bengal provided a good platform for other people of India to excel. But we rarely see this nowadays. And the last thing is that if I summarize both Professor Shen's talk and Kanchanda's this part, that means Bengal is connected with what not in science. That's what I was finding, and I did not find anything. For example, IIT Foundation, Bengal is connected. Indian Statistical Institute, both of them are excellent institutes in India now. Again, connection with Bengal. CSIR labs, connection with Bengal, and possible vaccine development and as well as medical discoveries. So that means Bengal was advanced science, spirituality, technology, medicine, architecture. But nowadays we see a gradual decline, as Kanchanda you touched upon. And another thing I would like to mention is that the actual knowledge and actual contribution of Bengalis and Indians in science and technology were hidden from us in our history. And I would also like to mention to our audiences that Kanchanda has done a pioneering work in bringing out the true history. And you may want to check out his book, Crash of Civilization. And I know he's continuously writing those books. With this note, I will ask Professor Shen one pertaining question. Like, if I just connect with Kanchanda's thought here, that nowadays we have seen that Bengal is deteriorating. And it's not like that we do not have talent. Because if we look at ISRO, this Chandrayaan mission, many Bengali people are involved. If we look at NASA, again, many Bengali scientists are involved. So when Bengalis are going outside of Bengal, they are performing great. But I am again not asking why are we not producing another JC Bose. Okay, let us keep that part, because JC Bose, many people will say he was a versatile genius and once in a million. But if we look at the current trend in Bengal, a boy or a girl with a master's degree and in fact with a PhD has no jobs. They have to apply for lower paying jobs and unsecured jobs and all. So Professor Shen, you are associated with India's oldest IIT, and that too located in West Bengal. So what is your take on that? Particularly with the unemployment rate in West Bengal in the current science sector, and how can we overcome that? What is your vision in this regard? And I will allow you 2 to 3 minutes this time, because I know many audiences are waiting for question answers, and of course we'll get into the audiences as well. Yes, please, Professor Shen.
Thank you. I think we have almost come to the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end, which is always a two-way thing. See, we have come at the end of a wave which is coming down. So what we see today, as Kanchanda just said, it's a wave is closing down in its collapse. So this collapsing of the wave was set up in the 1930s and the 40s, and through the days of Dr. B.C. Ray, the 50s and the 60s, Bengal was partially coming down. If you just pick up one paper on Kolkata by a planner, Nirmal Bose, it's called Calcutta, a Premature Metropolis. Nirmal Bose says it was published in Scientific American in the 60s. Just one line will clarify the entire reason. He says Calcutta was an industrial city, but it was born without the benefits of a Sheffield or a Manchester or a London, which drew from the benefits of industrial revolution, because it was always a backyard to the British imperialism. One. Two, after the British left, the backyard became the backyard of a backyard, because most of the industries went out of Bengal because of certain policies. Three, after the MISA, the Maintenance of the Internal Security Act, and then the problems with Bangladesh, the Bangladesh war, and the incoming waves of a certain kind of socialism, communism and Marxism from Vietnam, from China, and from Russia. There are different shades of communism all into Bengal. Bengal was in doldrums. Bengal was in doldrums. And the youth force of Bengal, including students of IIT Kharagpur. I have seen that. I've seen Bengals in the 70s were absolutely caught between a state which is coming down from its glorious past, almost like India from its glorious past coming to the Middle Ages. And then, on the other hand, with the Bangladesh war and everything, the airport is closed. I mean, the Pan Americans and BOSC and everything is diverted to Delhi and Mumbai. All the MNCs are diverted, and the Calcutta port is closed. And within a period of 25 years, that's from 1965 to 85, Bengal becomes even a backyard within the country, a state which was having the highest industrialization between 1921 to 41, went down in the rank of 22 within just a few decades. And it just became a backyard. And I can continue this story for the next 2 or 3 decades. And this is just the closing of the wave. So this is the darker side. No, tamasoma. What is the second side? Tamasoma jyotirgamaya. So where is the solution? We have discussed enough about the darkness, the hopelessness, but where is the hope? It is always a closing wave, which is a precursor to a surging wave. What I see as a humble teacher, as an ordinary teacher in IIT Kharagpur, amongst the boys who come from Bengal and also the surrounding areas, is a search, an aspiration, a lookout for something larger and bigger. So in the darkness, which is about 3 o'clock in the night, which is the darkest before the dawn, I think, and I very hopefully think, there is a resurgence, there is a great unleashing of what happened in this state hundreds of years back, and hundreds of years back, and thousands of years back, from the times of Rishishringa Muni to the times of Padma and Guru Milarepa, to the times of Gorakshanath Ji, to the times of Bhatpara Brahmins, which was a great center of learning, to the times of P.C. Ray, to C.V. Raman in Bengal. I think there is a resurgence, and we have to be hopeful, and it is happening. And how is this going to be inculcated? Because Bengal, because of lesser development in India right now, try to understand this. Because of lesser development in India right now, the cities and the towns of India, of Bengal, are the least polluted, the least damaged, having the least number of cars, the least number of urban blights, the least number. Are you following what I'm trying to say? Yeah, we have to understand this. So Bengal, by virtue of a default urbanization by its negation, is actually an antithesis or a reverse thesis to the next phase of development. So in the next 10-15 years, Bengal is the state which is again ready for the next surge of development, where a Bangalore is already a blight, which you require about 6 hours to reach the airport, where a Pune is becoming hopeless, and Mumbai is already a city of slums and high rises, and Delhi is absolutely in doldrums. You know what? I don't want to expand it in a public domain. It is Bengal by default, which is the design of Bidhata, which is ready for the next surge of development. Please try to understand what I am saying. So it is creating the setup for 2035 and 2045, when Dr. Arjak Bhattacharya will come back from Boston, and so will be his friends, and they'll be the next entrepreneurs of Bengal. And when Arjak and others reach my age, they'll be seeing another P.C. Roy, another Prashant Mahalnobish, another Ronald Fisher coming to ISI and giving a lecture and admitting that the Aryan invasion myth is actually wrong, and his guru, which was Carl Pearson, and his guru, which was Francis Galton, the half cousin of Charles Darwin, they have all committed a mistake in statistics because they have used racial data, which you cannot do under the ethics of science. So Ronald Fisher agreed that in front of Prashant Mahalnobish at ISI, where the Aryan invasion myth was first proved wrong in Kolkata. It happened in Kolkata. So it is a part of my book, which is the Aryan invasion that never was, and it shall be a part of many other books in the days to come. So let us be hopeful. Let us be very hopeful. So this is Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Asotoma Sadgamaya. I mean, we are heading for a brilliant future. So the coming decades, 2035, 45, 55, I think they're brilliant. And the forces of Swamiji and all his inmates, Vijay Krishna Goswami, and many other people whom we have not mentioned in this gathering, they are all working. They're all working. Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
that's so brilliant, Professor Sen, so brilliantly presented. I just wanted to add one more comment on that. That the our Prime Minister Modi is talking about India becoming a developed nation by 2047, when it will be 100 years after the independence from British. There are predictions by Sri Aurobindo that around that time India will become again positioned in the glory of nations. And I always mention this, that people are using Vishwa Guru. India has been a Vishwa Guru. India is a Vishwa Guru. India will be a Vishwa Guru because of such great people to birth on this soil. And you know, we have a lot to hope for, and hopefully, Professor Sen, you and me may be too old by then or may not be here, but Arjak and his generation will see a glorious India coming up very, very
And we,
soon.
as the rules of the sages, will be born again. Yeah. So we'll be like, and we'll be the students of Orjok and his friends in 2045 and 55 and 65. That is how Torongo milaye jaye, Torongo the Kusumo chhoriya, nahi khoy, nahi shesh, nahi nahi, doinno lesh. He punno tar paye, his mon sthan mage. Ache dukkho, ache mrittu, tobuo shanti jage. তবুও অনন্ত জাগে, তবুও অনন্ত জাগে. This is India, this is Bengal, this is Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, and this is the science of Bengal. The non-linear cyclic dynamics going on and on. There is no end. It will again come back. It will again come back.
Very nice to Professor Sen and Kanchanda. So, like, this part was extremely important because, as both of you mentioned, Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. So when I go to your age, I want to see the last part. Britturma Amritam Gamaya. And I will feel blessed if I see that in the Bengal, that lead us from death to immortality.
And the whole of India. And the whole
Whole
of
of
India.
India. Yeah, Bengal and the whole of India, of course. So as also Kanchanda mentioned, that Prime Minister Modi is visioning to make us a developed nation by 2047. And yes, we had been a Vishwaguru, we are a Vishwaguru, and India will be a Vishwaguru, no doubt about that. And in this context, I just want to mention one thing. Like, nowadays we talk a lot about artificial intelligence. It is taking over everything. I would like to refer one best-selling author from Israel, Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah,
So
Harari.
many of us have written his, like, have read his books. So there he mentioned, like, so far science is not able to develop artificial consciousness. Now, if I theoretically assume that, okay, after let's say 100 years, science is develop artificial consciousness, it will probably be the highest scientific discovery. But still, it is not violating the concepts of Vedanta, which is consciousness is all pervading and once. That means whatever development we are doing in science, it's actually converging towards spirituality. And that is the contribution of India to the rest of the world. And to summarize this talk, we have focused, like, we have started with the ancient times in Bengal, then the Renaissance period of the science and technology, and most importantly, we are taking a hope of that Mritturma Amritam Gamaya for the future. So we have, like, and another thing, the most important thing that came out of this talk is many eminent personalities whom we know mainly as a social reformer, as a spiritual leader, they also had a direct or indirect contribution in promoting science in Bengal as well as in India. Now we'll go to the audience question answer, and I'd request the Sangram Talks host to continue from here.
You're muted,
You are muted. Yeah.
Rajashri.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that very insightful talk. It has been truly enriching to be a part of this and to have these extremely precious presentations in my computer long after this meeting is over, which I am going to definitely look at. The first comment that we have is by Parimal Pandya ji, who is our YouTube viewer. He says that he's asked, what is the reality of the achievement of science with getting imported machinery from Chinese and semiconductor and jet engine technology for a long time?
I don't know if it is relevant to today's topic. Currently, if the even America is so much dependent on China. Of course, the world is, and India is. I know Indian government is working on this side, but eventually these ideas of make in India and build in India and so forth, the ideas that our current government is propagating, hopefully will come out of that mode in next decade or so.
The next question and the last for this session is actually a comment that I would like our speakers today to expand on. Chandan Bandyopadhyay ji has said that Rabindranath Tagore ji raised money from many places, including from the King of Tripura for J.C. Bose.
I would like to attempt that. So Rabindranath, it's just like like a vast ocean. His personality, his contribution is so difficult to measure at this time. People can go back to the last episode to hear more about him. But Rabindranath has always been supportive of anybody's suffering anywhere. Any Indian is in trouble anywhere. But he was regularly contributing to the people like J.C. Bose and others for scientific advancement. And his Santiniketan, he never borrowed money from people to build anything, but Santiniketan was built based on his own wealth and his own vision. He brought Gurukul system back to Santiniketan, which is a model institute which the rest of India can emulate, not that the current form we get Santiniketan in news for wrong reasons. But his vision was that integration of, as Professor Sen kept on saying, the spirituality, the Vedic knowledge, the modern science, arts, and he brought all the best people from around the world. And then again, he helped so many people in so many different ways. Is endless, discussion on that. But I also want to mention that uh, that some of the greatest scientists in the West also had a connection to Rabindranath, as we mentioned, Heisenberg and Einstein. And it's the soil of Bengal has something magical. Not that because I'm a Bengali, but Bengal soil has something magical that produced these geniuses for so many centuries, so many hundreds of thousands of years. The fertile land, as Professor Sen mentioned, will come back again to contribute more for the rest of the country and the world.
Well, our panel, in their great achievements, have walked the talk that they elucidated today. I would just like to take this opportunity to bring forth the cover of this book that I was mentioning during Arjagji's introduction, which is called Ancient Indian Science, Technologies and Culture Decoding the Vedas from Engineering to Consciousness, which has been published by Garud Prakashan, New Delhi. This book has become an Amazon bestseller immediately after release on August 30th of 2023. Please go on. Go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say two things. Do you know why this slide is so important? Because it's not a book by someone who is 50 years old or 60 years old, but it's by
He's
someone.
he's 30
Yeah,
years old.
he's
Professor
just
Sen,
30 years.
Arjak
Yeah,
is just
30
30.
years. Just 30. And there'll be more and more books like this in the future. That's point number one. And point number two, it's by Garuda Publication, which is a signature of India. And even Oppenheimer is to own a car. The name of that car was Garuda, because he fell in love with the icon of the Thunderbird, you know. And Garuda, I think you know, is the icon of about 6 or 7 airlines from Iran to Indonesia. So that is just a small add-on. It's not that important, but I think this is a signature of a certitude and more to come in the days and the years. Thank you so much.
I think that ends the session today. Thank
Yep.
you,
Okay. Thank you so much.
our
Yep.
viewers and Sangam.
Just before we end, I would request Kanchan sir to shed light on what a Bangla Abhar is. I think that is what was also planned.
I
Yeah.
already spoke about it. Bangla Abar is a non-profit NGO, both in US and in Kolkata, and we organize different events and activities online and on site. For example, yesterday there was an event at ICCR Kolkata where we um, actually discussed about the contribution of the Biranganas, the women freedom fighters from Bengal, and it was a very rainy day, but still the hall was packed. So we organize events and activities, and this series is happening to bring awareness about Bengal's culture, heritage, and history, music, science, and all of this. And so it's a great platform we have created a few years back, and we are very proud to do this series with Sangam Talks as well. Thank you.
Before we end, I would request Arjagji to explain what the following episode will be about, and after that, we can depart from the audience.
Yep, thank you so much. So, thank you again, viewers, for coming us and supporting us today. The next session, next Sunday at 8:30 p.m. IST, will be another enlightening session on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and their very reputed researcher, Professor Kapil Kumar, will present his talk and his research about what we know about Bose and what we do not know about Bose. So that's why I request all of you to please join that talk also on the research and many unknown facts about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Thank you so much. Namaskar.